Welcome to the static lighting tutorial. With static lighting, you can achieve significantly more realistic results compared to dynamic lighting. However, static lighting only works for static, non-moving actors and cannot be changed once it has been baked. For this reason, static lighting is only recommended for scene builds, which you can then use as stage for your animation and combine it with dynamic lighting. This tutorial will teach you how to set up static lighting for your scene and what to be mindful of. Static lighting has to be baked, but before we can do so, we first have to place some light sources in the scene. The initial steps are very similar compared to dynamic lighting, and you can use the same light source types. Let's start by placing a point light source in the scene. Next, enable the baked property of the light source, which will turn the dynamic light source into a static one. Note how upon enabling the property, the light source disappears from the viewport, but it will still influence the scene once we start baking the light maps. You do not have to enable the cast shadows property, as static light sources always cast shadows. In order to bake the light maps, we will have to use the Cycles X renderer. Depending on your hardware, the scene complexity, and other factors, baking can take a long time. To get a fast approximation of what the scene will look like with baked light maps, you can switch to the Live RT mode. Any changes you make to static light sources are only visible while you are in this mode, which is why it is recommended to leave this mode turned on until you have finished setting up all of the static light sources and are ready to bake the light maps. Turn on Live RT mode to continue. PFM may appear frozen for a moment when you do. Now try changing some of the light's properties, such as the color or intensity, or try moving it around to see how it changes in the viewport. Note that some properties, like the radius, do not have any effect on static light sources. If you have an outdoors scene or an indoors scene connected to the outdoors, for instance through windows, the static lighting can also be heavily influenced by adding a sky. To do so, you will have to add a sky actor to your scene. Try doing so now. In Live RT mode, some actions, like adding a sky, cannot be updated automatically. In such cases, you have to press the Refresh RT View button to see the changes. Try pressing it now to see how the lighting changes with the sky. You can change the sky's strength property to increase its influence on the lighting. However, you will have to refresh the RT view whenever you change it. In addition, changing the sky texture or sky angle will also affect the lighting. Try changing the sky strength to 8 and refresh the RT view. Once you're satisfied with the lighting in the scene, you can start the baking process. To do so, you first need to add a light mapper actor to your scene, which we will use to render the light maps. Create the light mapper to continue. Next, select the baked lighting component of the light mapper in the actor editor. You can find it in the baking collection. The light mapper has a variety of render settings. However, it is generally recommended to use the quality presets instead. Higher preset quality options will significantly improve the quality of the light maps at the cost of increased render times, as well as higher disk space and video memory usage. The recommended setting for baking the final light maps is Production 4K, However, rendering with this setting may take several hours or more. For this demonstration, we will just use some low-quality settings with which it should only take a few minutes to render. Change the preset to Low to continue. Next, click on Bake Light Maps to start the render. Please note that PFM may appear frozen for a bit before rendering starts. Please wait for the render to complete. This may take a few minutes. Until the render is complete, the objects in the viewport may appear distorted and PFM may react slowly to inputs. The baking is now complete. The window that has opened allows you to inspect the baked light maps for potential issues, but you can close it for now. In the viewport, you can now view the scene with the baked lighting. Because of the low-quality settings we used, you may notice artifacts and blurry shadows. These will improve significantly when you render with higher quality settings. Before we continue, you should know about an alternative method for baking light maps. As mentioned earlier, baking at higher quality settings can take a long time, which is why it is generally recommended to use a render job instead. As you may remember from the render panel tutorial, a render job allows you to render without having to keep PFM running. Let's give it a shot. To create a lightmap render job, press the Generate Render Job button. A new Explorer window will appear with a file called render.bat. You can execute this render job by double-clicking it to start the render. Normally, you could then close PFM and let the render continue in the background until it is complete. But for the purposes of this tutorial, let's keep PFM running. Wait for the render to complete, then press Continue. Once the lightmap textures have been rendered using the render job, you can press the Auto Import button. This will automatically import the rendered lightmap textures and assign them to this scene. This method produces the same results. Once the lightmap textures have been rendered using the render job, you can press the Auto Import button. This will automatically import the rendered lightmap textures and assign them to this scene. This method produces the same results, but has the advantage that you do not have to keep PFM running during the render. Using this method will also decrease the render times. Now that the static lighting has been baked, you cannot make any changes to it anymore without rebaking the light maps. You can still, however, adjust the light map exposure level, which gives you some small control over the overall brightness of the static lighting. You may have noticed that the character in the scene is completely unlit. This is because light maps can only be used with static actors, and the character in this scene is a dynamic actor. In order to make use of static lighting for dynamic actors, you need to add and bake a reflection probe to the scene as well. Try creating a reflection probe now. Reflection probes capture reflection information of the scene all around them. To be most effective, the reflection probe should be placed near the center of your scene, in view of the scene camera. It should be roughly an eye height, and there should be no other static actors or walls nearby obstructing it. Switch to the Move tool in the viewport, then move the reflection probe to the indicated position in the scene to continue. Once you have found a good position for your reflection probe, it still has to be baked. Fortunately, this is much faster compared to baking light maps and should only take a few seconds. Select the reflection probe component and press the Bake Reflection Probe button to continue. Please wait for the baking to complete. A new window has opened, which shows the rendered reflection data as a spherical view. You can click into the view and move the mouse to look around. The view should contain all of the static actors in the scene, and some portions may appear blurry. In general, if parts of the scene are obstructed, you need to move the probe to a different position and bake it again. As with the light maps, the reflection probe will also have to be rebaked if you make any changes to the static lighting in the scene. You can now close the reflection probe view. If you take a look at the viewport, you'll notice that the character no longer appears black, which means it is now affected by the reflection probe. Please note that reflection probes only apply some indirect lighting to dynamic actors. You will still need to place dynamic light sources as well to make sure your dynamic actors are lit properly. This concludes the tutorial on static lighting. You can now end the tutorial or press the Continue button to start the next series.